But in any case, we're going to want to also keep in mind we have these particles that fly out of the particle sim up here. And when they fly out, they're not really, they're being stamped wherever they are. Like these streaks here, they're moving pretty fast. But onto the fluid source, they just exist wherever they exist. What we want is a motion blur. Now, this does have this motion blur thing here, but I would say don't try not to use this, only because if you say like, oh, 4 geometry samples, great, it'll subsample it at 4 times over the last frame, but it's just gonna blur them all together. It's literally gonna average them together, and that's, you're gonna have like, if you're gonna make a high res input, you might as well have it actually have some actual detail in it that's not been blurred away by that averaging. So what are we gonna do instead? Well, instead, let's construct some streaks that streak back along the velocity vector. So what I'm typing here is the point minus the increment, time increment, that's going to be 1 divided by the frame rate. And so what is this saying? It's saying take the points and say go back along the velocity vector 1 frame's worth. So you can see if these are our velocity vectors here, and you look at this, you'll see it's gone back exactly that amount. And what we can do with this is we can actually draw a line between these two things. Now, we're only interested in doing this for the ones that are moving, like that are flying off into space. We don't need to do this maybe for the ones that are actually from the rigid surface. Remember, we have 2 of these here. We've got the particle one and the source one here. So for this one, turning off the particles. For this one, turning off the source. So now it's just the particle sim one, and these ones are just the ones from the surface. So anyway, so we've got the original position. We've got the previous position based on the velocity. Merge them together. So now we have both. And these points have an ID attribute, which was created by the particle simulation. So I'm going to connect them together by that ID. And when I duplicated them here, essentially, they kept the same ID. And the IDs are unique. Even as particles are created and destroyed, the ID number is never reused. So look at that. It kind of looks like sparks. Like the faster it's moving, the longer those lines are, and as they slow down, they become smaller. They slow down because of the drag in our particle sim. Great. What else can we do here? I think we're going to want to make this p-scale even smaller now. We have more particles. Not only do we have more particles, we're going to have more voxels anyway. So let's tighten up what the p-scale gets to. And actually, I'm going to put it back for a second so you can see the difference that makes. And I'll even actually put this back. So here we are with that. I feel like now that we're really trying to capture these streaks, we're going to want it to probably be thinner also. So here's a good frame of, I was going to say a frame of reference, but it's actually, I guess it is truly a frame of reference. We've got this gap here, right? But now, with this method, we have all these streaks. These streaks can be turned back into points with a resample. The resample is going to break up the polygon lines based on these length segments. So we went from having the point to a line, and then this is smashing the line into these segments. Each one's going to be 0.1 units long. And now that is what will actually feed into our the rest of what we already had, basically. I'll merge these guys back in, put this guy here, and voila, we'll see better streaking in the actual sample. And look at that, much better. Great. It seems very thick to me, so let's just go ahead and bring that down by a lot. And the p-scale, again, is the radius, and that seems more appropriate, these thinner streaks. And just to make me feel better, I feel like if this left one here is the leading edge of our line, and this was the rear of the lines that we created, I think the p-scale at the tip should be even smaller. Kind of like making a little bit of a spear shape. So I'm just going to apply this p-scale change to the leading edge one. It seems like it might have slightly changed, but I can't really tell. But anyway, the idea being that this point has a very small radius, this one has the original radius. So it's going to interpolate along those lines. Cool. Great. While we're here, we could probably also, we can look at our velocity, see if that's changed now that we've added all these extra points. We want the curl noise, it's just hard to see sometimes with it on. These are kind of thick too. I'm going to bring the sample distance in by half. That way it's not, the voxels are not looking as far around to find values. See that, how I changed that down to 0.1? We could actually even do that, and let's do that. Let's do that on the density itself as well. Like that. Well, I kind of got rid of a lot of what we were doing. So in retrospect, I think maybe we will keep it at 0.2. So I'm going to save this too while I'm working here. Cool, and in keeping with all this newfound resolution stuff that we'll get to play with, let's make the sharpness come up here a lot. We already have grain at 1, but we can get the turbulence up to 8. You can see in here how it's adding more sub-detail, I'll call it. Make the element size larger because all of this extra turbulence and whatnot is going to play into this anyway. The element size is like the overall like repetition of our texture here. We can use some of the cell settings. The cell stuff adds even more. It's kind of like it's a different kind of noise that will kind of be modulated with that. You just kind of play with it, move it around. Let's see, we can make the cell size bigger. Again, you can see how it's like a different noise moving through the noise that we already have. The way I always think of cell settings, these are like sharper changes, like bigger units of change. So look at that. So now we've got this nice crunchy, really crunchadelic looking thing here. And that'll play really nicely with our actual high-res sim.